So quick thing on CoTap, simple, secure mobile messaging app for teams. If you kind of look back at the history of communication tools in the workplace, there's a repeatable pattern where new technology starts in our personal lives, and then it finds its way into our professional lives. This is true of email. It's true of desktop chat, if you remember like your AIM screen name. It started as a friends and family thing, and then quickly it got into our work lives. Is true of social networking. That's kind of Yammer was an example of that. And we believe the same principle is going to be true with mobile messaging. So you can think of CoTap as a WhatsApp for work. This new style of communication is becoming rampant. It seems the more mobile we are, we want things that work really well on our phones. And there's really not a good option out there right now. There are apps, like Yammer's got an app. There's a bunch of the communication tools that have apps. But when you really want to take advantage of a new type of computing paradigm, whether that's going to the cloud or, in this case, going mobile, you want to start from the ground up and be very specific about how you build your product. So that's a little bit about CoTap. Hopefully you guys can all get into that group and post some things. We'll take a look at the end of it. So today I'm covering 4 areas. The first is Angry Birds. Who here has played Angry Birds before? OK, cool. There's actually, surprisingly, a lot of great analogies to that game and how a good customer success or customer experience organization should be operated. The second is Angry People. Who here has dealt with angry clients or customers before? OK, great. So we'll talk about that. The third is Instrumentation. That's where a lot of our experience with Totango comes in and other tools. And then fourth, to bring it home, we'll talk about some real-world examples of how we've used Totango to improve some processes or things that we do to improve the customer experience. OK, so Angry Birds, fun, addictive game. A lot of kids play it. But how does it apply to this conversation? So I'll start by kind of backing up a little bit. The first important thing is to figure out where your organization is at from a maturity standpoint. Actually, the guys from Bright Talk were talking about your maturity stage and understanding where you're at. It's actually very important for a lot of reasons. This chart here is a pretty famous, especially in San Francisco, pretty famous chart from Paul Graham about the startup evolution, where you've got like, you get your TechCrunch funding announcement and everything's going crazy, and then for the next year or more, you're kind of like thrashing around trying to figure out product market fit. Then you finally hit it, and then you're kind of off to the races. But there's a whole, this line keeps going forever this way for the older companies. So whether you're here or whether you're much further to the right, it's good for you to know where your company is at, because that will influence a lot of the decisions you make on what to do, what to try, what not to try, et cetera. OK, so how does that apply to Angry Birds? Angry Birds, if you think about it, you follow the same 3 steps over and over and over and over and over again, whether they get you on like Angry Birds in Space or Star Wars Angry Birds or whatever it is. You're really just doing the same repeating 3 steps over and over and over. And that is, you aim your bird at something, you pull your finger back and you fire it, and then you learn from that and you adjust. OK. So now if we think about how that applies to the work we do, it's actually very similar. We think about things, we plan them for a long time, then we try them, and then we see how it works, and we learn from them. And it's a constant loop of aiming, firing, and adjusting. I think this is a very, very important loop to be cognizant of and to make sure that your team is doing all the time. But there's a few things to keep in mind. This isn't, mistakes that people can make are either to never do this, like analysis paralysis, just like be too worried about the consequences of trying things. Or on the other hand, trying too many things all the time and just kind of thrashing around and never making progress. So bringing this back to what we were talking about with state is acting your age. OK, and what I mean by that is there's different flows based on how mature your organization, your department, your team is at. If you're young, like CoTap is relatively young, you spend less time aiming, more time firing, and then a lot of time adjusting. So we're constantly kind of going through this loop trying new things and weaving the learnings back into our process. So a lot of loops, a lot of cycles, shorter experimentation timeframes. When you're old, it's kind of the opposite. You spend a lot of time aiming or planning, very little time firing. You've got like one shot, and then a lot of time adjusting based on what you've learned on that, right? And I have two very good experiences on both ends of the spectrum. So again, at CoTap, we're trying a lot of things. We're iterating a lot. At Microsoft, we would plan for like 2 years on something and then roll it out and then take another 3 years to learn what we uncovered from that experiment, which is good because your addressable audience is so much bigger when you're at that scale. So again, remember where you're at and then use that as to inform your speed of looping through this cycle. Okay, cool. So that's Angry Birds. Now, angry people. This is my colleague Martin. He's a French Caribbean guy, really awesome guy. And early on, he said this quote. I think it's a French quote, but he said, "You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs." And I think this is very, very astute. I think it's very applicable to the work we do. And the one thing I think, what I want to get across is when you're trying these experiments, when you're learning, chances are you're going to rub some people the wrong way. We absolutely did this at Yammer a lot of times. And it was scary. Like when we rolled something out or tried something new and we knew that there was some portion of our user base that was going to be very unhappy with the changes we made, it was frightening. And there was a lot of like concern and friction to trying those things. But ultimately, it was for the good of the masses, I guess is a good way of thinking it. So you're going to have some angry people when you do experimentation. You're not always going to make everybody happy. But for your business and for your success, sometimes you got to do some uncomfortable things and take the risk or just own the reality that not everyone's going to be happy. And a practical example of this is with Toggle. So we had a lot of conversations at Yammer, at CoTap, at Deloitte about toggles and technology. A lot of times when you're thinking about rolling out some new feature or some new change to one of your apps, there's going to be a big part of your user base that's going to be really thrilled about it, and there's going to be some part of your user base that's going to be very unhappy about it. And so the obvious solution to that is, oh, okay, we'll just put a toggle in the admin console or on the back end. We'll just flip it off for some of our customers. It's like, sounds easy, sounds great, but actually toggles are your worst nightmare. So I don't know like the spectrum of where you're all at, whether you're more on the product side or the CSM side. Regardless, the CSMs, I know we dealt with this all the time at Yammer because we were the face of the company to our customers. And we were the ones hearing all these requests for, oh, can we put a toggle on this new feature because we don't need it or we don't want it, whatever. And it was really hard to say no. But the reason why toggles are your worst nightmare is because of the exponential permutations that they create. Okay, so as an example, just like a little thought experiment, let's say you start with one product with no toggles. You add one toggle. Now you have 2 versions of that thing. So you start from 1, and now you've got 2. If you add a second toggle, you get 4. You add a third, you get 8, and so on and so forth. This becomes a very, very big burden on your business, especially on the product and engineering side. I just saw another Yammer person in the crowd. What's up? So yeah, everybody's laughing about this. Okay, so a few examples. QA. I'm sure you guys have a big QA group at your company. It becomes exponentially harder for them to do their jobs the more toggles that are on. So while you may be appeasing some of your customers who have requirements, are going to be unhappy about something by putting a toggle in place, you're actually going to grind your business to a halt over time. And that's actually a big reason why those bigger companies have a hard time adjusting, because they've got all these different variations of their product to deal with when they try to innovate or bring something new to market. And another famous quote by a very famous person, when there's so many haters and negative things, I really don't care. That's from my girl Kim. So I wouldn't say let's take her advice to heart. You do want to empathize with your customers and hear them and listen to them and make sure you're not doing just like foolish maneuvers because you want to be bold and brash. You need to be thoughtful. You need to listen to people. But again, there's going to be some haters out there, and you just got to get over the haters. OK, so we talked about Angry Birds. We talked about angry people. Now, instrumentation. So picture of an orchestra. Orchestras are beautiful. They make great music. This podium is like really in the way. But the reason they make such good music is because there's this combination of a lot of different literal instruments coming together to make some noise that is very pleasing to us. So through this combination of a lot of specifications and expertise, you create this very beautiful thing. I think this is another great analogy to the work we do and what we can focus on to always be doing better at what we're doing. So in terms of what we're using at CoTap for instrumentation, these are like our different instruments in the orchestra. So we're using Salesforce, obviously, Mixpanel, Marketo, user testing, Segment.io, Optimizely, and another big one is Totango. And that's why I'm here. We started using Totango about a year ago, and it's been really good for us, specifically because they're able to give us network or company level insights into what our users and what our customers are doing, how they're reacting to different products. So on that note, if you guys see that there's an opportunity to tweak or refine or add some specification to your instrumentation, I would say pursue it. You don't want to like go crazy on these things and have a little app for every little nook and cranny of your product or experience, but there's some very key areas that can help you uncover insights and do what you do better. OK, 2 real-life examples, and then we'll do some Q&A. So the first is our program called NUT, New User Tapping. That's a screenshot of CoTap down there. Who's able to get on the CoTap group so far? That's pretty good. Nice. OK, so one interesting thing about CoTap is that it works across networks. That's how everybody's able to be in this group right now and communicate with each other. So there's no network or company barrier to communication. You do have to sign up with your work email address so we can put you into a directory based on your domain. But we don't prevent people from communicating externally. One of the implications of that is we can actually move our relationship and our correspondence from email into CoTap directly. So this was kind of like an aha moment for us, and my team decided to, as quickly as we could, shift our communications into a CoTap group or a one-to-one conversation with our customers or prospects. But what we found, and through the help of Totango, is that this is not always a good idea. This is a great example of one of those aim, fire, adjust. So we spent like not very much time aiming. We just sort of started like tapping new users and saying, hey, how you liking CoTap? Thanks for trying it, whatever. And started learning from those responses. Turns out, because CoTap is so similar to texting, people have these like built-in paradigms of how they text with people. It's a little more personal, a little more informal. So when they hear out of the blue from a CoTap person sending them a message in CoTap when they just tried it, it was a little off-putting. So, and we learned this through doing it a lot and then looking at the data and seeing what actions like the people that we sent messages to, what actions did they take after we sent them a message. Sometimes they didn't respond to us, but they did take another beneficial action like setting a profile photo or connecting a file service or something like that. So Totango helped us iterate on these things, among others, what we said in our intro message, when we sent it, so how long we gave them before we hit them up. Recipient criteria, so who we sent messages to. We didn't want to, like if you just signed up and you never sent any messages and then you hear from us, it's kind of weird. But if you're a power user and you clearly are setting up a bunch of groups and you're loving it, then those people are more likely to talk to us. So we used Totango and some other tools to help us refine that recipient criteria to make sure that our response rate was highest and that this was a positive experience, not an annoying one. And then finally, the sender. I don't know if you guys have tried this with email marketing or anything, but it's really interesting to play around with who messages are coming from. I've worked with a bunch of companies like Yammer, Dropbox, CoTap now, where the persona that represents the company has evolved over time. So if you guys haven't tried that, I would suggest it. It's pretty interesting. OK, so that's one of them. That was a lot of fun. And the next was large networks. So because CoTap is based on your work email address, there's companies of all sizes. There's really giant companies, and there's companies of one person. And so what we wanted to look into is, do our large networks behave differently than our small ones? And it turns out they do. So one of the things that we looked at is, through Totango, is so we segmented based on large networks over 5,000 employees. And we saw what type of actions they were taking when they first tried CoTap. And the first thing that they invariably did is go to the people directory to see who they knew that was using CoTap in their company. That was really interesting because small companies, obviously, it's not as important. You pretty much know what everybody's doing. Large companies, you have really no idea what other people in your company are doing or what tools they're using. So we prioritize it in our product, in the web app onboarding, the people tab or the directory. So new users could very quickly get to this directory to see who else in their company was using CoTap. So all this made possible by Totango, and again, these are all that same concept of aim, fire, adjust. Don't be afraid to piss people off, and so the piss people off thing comes in the new user tapping because, again, some people were like, what is this? Who are you? I don't want to hear from you. But it was good because we learned a lot, and we've weaved those learnings back into our product, and now it's a better experience as a result. OK, so key takeaways. Number one, get clarity on where you're at. Know if you're mature or if you're immature. If you're immature, be more experimental. Try things. Foster a culture of experimentation in your company. Don't be afraid to try things. Make sure to be, if everybody on your team is like, oh, well, I don't know the answer to this question, but here's some things I'm thinking about trying to figure it out, that's beautiful. That's a great thing. It's like empowering. People are going to want to work harder and more for you. And don't be afraid to break some eggs. So again, if one of your teammates comes to you and says, hey, I've got this idea for an experiment, and the first thing that pops into your head is like worst case scenario, that's good to know that, but don't let that just thwart the idea completely. Like think it through, think if there's some positive things that can come as a result. And then tune your instruments. So make sure to always keep an eye out for where you think you're weak on understanding your user base, your customer base. And there's like tools for everything now, especially like around here. You can figure it out pretty quickly, like who's doing what. So keep an eye out for those things. Keep an open mind to new products and try them out. Treat that just like the whole experimentation loop. That's what we did with Totango. We didn't really know how it was going to work. And we tried it, and we hooked it up to our data pipeline, and it was great. So we went with it. OK, last thing, try CoTap. The best thing to do is put that URL into your browser. We also have got this thing called CoTap.me. Anybody can create a personalized URL to give out to people, and they could send you text, basically. It's like a phone number, except it's a URL. So you could send me questions to CoTap.me/Brian, or join that group, and I'll be posting some things there. And the last thing I wanted to do, since we just introduced video into our app, is take a video of you all, if you don't mind. Cool, there's a bunch of people joining. So I'll post this into our little group here. So on 3, I'll do the 1, 2, 3. If everybody can say, hello, CoTap, that'd be awesome. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's awesome. Cool, thanks for playing along. All right, that was my presentation. I'd love to answer some questions. Anybody got some burning things they've got on their mind? Yes?
So the session right before in this room was all about, it was a bright talk.
Yeah.
All about kind of building process, right? It's two very different approaches.
Yeah.
They've been successful. Do you feel like they are as polarized as it kind of seems, at first glance, or how does that fit in? How does that fit in your model as well?
Yeah, I would answer that by saying I think BrightTalk has been around longer than CoTap, so they're further along in the maturity. So it's no surprise that they're focused more on process. There also is something to be said about like the culture that you're fostering. Some people are more process-oriented. Other people are more experimentation-oriented. I would say with CoTap, it comes from the top. Our CEO is very like open-minded and likes to try things. So they are at odds. I would say figure out your state, where you are on your lifespan. use that to inform as the #1 indicator of process versus experimentation. But then like use your own personal brand and what you're comfortable with too, because that's another kind of spectrum to help you hone in on where you should be. That's a good question though. Sometimes I wonder like, are we being too experimental and I'm sure the process people are like, are we being too process driven? Like, there's no exact answer, but yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I know there's like a hot button issue with like gender in the Valley these days, but like one actual thing is that if you try, like female senders are actually perform better than male senders as like the persona of your brand. If it's like at scale and it's just like a person's name. So that was something we learned. We tried doing it with a non-human, like Team CoTap. And that was good in some ways in that people felt more willing to respond because it was like a robot kind of. Bad in some ways in that people were less likely to respond. So less likely, but when they did, they were more responsive, I guess is what I'm saying. So those are two of the main ones that I remember. Yeah. Yep.
You talked about behaviors with large and small clients. How about sort of more mature clients versus brand new clients?
Yeah.
Something you've explored with Totango, I was just curious if there's any insights you've learned from that.
Yeah, well, one thing that in terms of like, so you're talking about the customer's maturity model.
The clients with your team. So
Okay.
a client of yours, so somebody that's been with, I know it's a relatively new organization, but let's say a 2-year-old client versus a 2-week-old.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so yes, we did look into this. We used to do these, so CoTap is actually best for either teams that are fully mobile or like hybrid mobile and desk. So actually like most of Silicon Valley is not the best use case for CoTap, except in situations like this. Like I bet all of you guys were texting your colleagues while you were here. That's where CoTap comes into play. The reason I bring that up is, so when we go to do a rollout, a lot of times we'll try and coordinate or time it around an event, right? Where everybody is going to naturally want to use this thing in a big way. So what we learned is like that was great, everybody was using it, and then when they got to their desks, if they were a desk-based team, like the usage plummeted back down. So then we needed to optimize on getting them on the web and desktop versions of CoTap because we have those apps as well. So that was kind of a good learning is like when we were just starting off, yes, use the momentum of a pre-existing event to get awareness, but realize there's going to be like that peak is going to come back down, and then you got to work on other more sustainable things like getting them on the other app. If they start on mobile, getting them on desktop. If they start on desktop, getting them on mobile. And then in terms of longer term clients, it's what we've done is we've broken it. Like these huge companies, typically they have like, obviously they're very regional and that's how they're structured and that's who they know. So we just do like kind of a series of mini rollouts. And as the people in those rollouts like mature over time, they get more comfortable with CoTap, we just introduce new features to them to get them more embedded. Like if people haven't set a profile photo, we like do a blast for that. If they haven't tried connecting a file service like Box or Dropbox, Google Drive, et cetera, we'll push that. So more kind of like power user features, I guess, is what we'll focus them on. Yep.
How do you balance innovation and experimentation versus responding to customer feature requests?
So we take in all the customer feature requests. If it aligns to our roadmap, we basically say like, oh my God, what a great idea. Let me go back and talk to the product team, and then we'll come right back to them and be like, we're doing it, which is like a good CSM trick. But usually you just have to have like some fortitude. You can't just like, the worst thing for you to do is like take little inputs and use them to drive your product, because you're going to drive yourself into, you're going to pigeonhole yourself. We've seen this with a lot of different products who like, they see an opportunity in a very specific category, and then they like bend their roadmap to serve that particular group, and then like they get there and it's great for that group, but now they've missed out on all this other opportunity. David Sachs is really good at this at Yammer, just having a bigger term vision and not letting the little things distract from what we were really trying to go after. Jim Patterson, our CEO at CoTap, is similarly kind of long-term minded, but when there are things that align to our roadmap, or aligned to where we want to go, then absolutely we take them in and we just prioritize them against everything else. One interesting thing I've learned is that startups in general are just a matter of time. Like, you think it's about fundraising and how much money you have, but really that's just a proxy for how much time do you have to find product market fit before you have to go raise again. And so with that in mind, your roadmap is just a constant battle of prioritization. Like, you have so many things, but what should you do now? How much does it cost in terms of engineering hours? How quickly can you roll it out based on like your limitations on the App Store or whatever it is? So yeah, it's just a matter of prioritization and alignment to existing roadmap.
All right, so that's the last question that we have time for today, and it's now time for lunch downstairs in the expo hall. Thank you so much.